our kind of eyes and ears, man. So
this is Iowa Everywhere. And now it's time for Two Guys Named Chris, powered by Fairway Meat and Grocery. This is Iowa Everywhere for the fans.
what is going on? Welcome to Two Guys Named Chris here on Monday, the 26th of September. I'm coming in a little hot today.
Coming in hot.
The toddler. She's been we had she went on vacation, and then she got COVID when she got back from vacation. So she hasn't been to daycare in like 2 weeks, and then it just like hassle. They lose their minds because they get in she just wants to like hang out here all the time, and it was a disaster. How's your morning been? You got a hurricane coming.
Yeah, it looks like it's gonna the eye and the worst parts of it are gonna be more on the Gulf side. See, I'm on the Atlantic Ocean side, by Miami and that area. So we're gonna get a ton of rain. They're saying we could get up to 10 inches of rain, but we're gonna hopefully the way it's going miss the worst parts of it. But right now they're saying could get to Category 4 and hit that Tampa area, as a 3 maybe. So. Fingers crossed. We've been lucky so far. I've lived here for 5 years, and we have not had any hurricanes come through.
How far are you from the actual water, like your house?
1 mile.
Oh, okay. So you could get flooding and stuff then, right?
Could,
or is that
yes.
too far out? I don't know.
No, you could. And the thing is, with insurance down here, it's bad because of the hurricanes and all that. They will not cover flooding. Insurance won't cover that. Yeah. So they'll cover wind damage, but not flooding. And the only insurance you can get down here is state-sponsored insurance. You can't do, you're not getting traveler's insurance or anything like that. It's a little scary when a hurricane threatens. Now, like 3 years ago, I think it was it Dorian that came? It was a Category 5, and it got within 30 miles of shore, but it just stayed over the Bahamas and did not get us at all. So we were very fortunate there. But I think we'll be okay. And I don't have a game this week, so I'm staying home regardless.
That's great. Well, good for you. Shout out to Fairway, our presenting sponsor here on Two Guys Named Chris. The Fairway Meat Market up there in Ames is fantastic.
Chris, what the hell are you doing over there? Because I keep getting these people asking me, "Hey, did you get your box of meat from Fairway yet? I'd love to see what's in it."
I don't know. We're supposed to be getting boxes.
I thought you were in charge of that.
Well, no. I gave him your address, so I know that the wheels.
Okay.
The wheels
I every day I see the UPS man, and I'm running out there, and I'm looking for that box of meat.
You got my meat. You're gonna get some meat. I promise you. I promise.
I don't doubt it. I can't wait.
You want to start Iowa or Iowa State today?
You know what? I think the Iowa State thing is a bigger deal because that was a bigger game and that was disappointing.
It was, yeah. I thought of something too, and we just have to be real with ourselves when you give opinions all the time. And so I had Baylor winning the Big 12 in my preseason poll, and after one double overtime loss in Provo, I docked them, and it was.
Well, and I docked them too. I docked them as well, not for that, but for then how BYU looked the week after.
Yeah, and I'm watching that game on Saturday, and it was just man, this is a really good team. They were better than Iowa State, and then there's a lot to get into and we will about the officiating and stuff. But up front they were better. Shapen was better than Deckers throughout the day, I thought. He really made some really impressive throws, specifically in the third quarter. Third quarter, Baylor outclassed Iowa State across the board. Very specific. Just across the board, they were better. But yeah, we're going to talk about the Big 12 too, but I think that they're the clear-cut favorite right now. I don't know how much that means, but Baylor with a big win going into Ames against another team that, right, Iowa State, we thought could be a contender to get to Dallas. Still could be.
Yeah, I mean, it still could be, yeah, but
that's a big drop when you drop the home game against another contender.
Right. And now, Baylor has to lose a couple times for you to pass them in the standings. Like I said, it was a swing game going into the week, and Iowa State being at home, they were favored in this game. They had done all the things they needed to do in September leading up to this. They handled the cupcakes. They got the monkey off their back with the win against Iowa. I thought this was a good time to be seeing Baylor, and it turned out that Baylor was the better team. There's no question, but I think that the officiating did alter the state of this game, and it wasn't just Iowa State fans doing what they like to do and blame the officials when maybe they shouldn't be. But there were some really, really big calls early in that game that changed the course of the game. I don't know if it changed the outcome, but it certainly changed the course of that game.
No doubt. And Brock producing the program today, Brock Bierman for us, and he's got some of these calls for us from Twitter. This is the targeting call, if you're watching on the stream, that got Bo Freeler, who, I mean, he's one or two as far as Iowa State's best defensive player. I would put Will McDonald one. But Will McDonald is being double-teamed every play now and is kind of being taken out of games. That's the targeting that got him ejected less than 2 minutes into the football game. And you lose the player. Here's my thing, Chris, and you call these games all the time, so you probably have a better understanding of the rules and stuff than I do, but I just feel like we have to have some discretion in college football where even if that's targeting, okay, and I don't think it is, but even if it is, lead him with the crown of the helmet, okay, like he shouldn't be ejected for that.
Totally agree.
Right? There's got to be some gray area when it comes
Yes,
to
and what they've done, though, is they've really taken the gray areas out. And, and it started, I don't know when that was, 10 years ago with the face mask, where you used to have 5-yard and 15-yard face masks. And then they said, oh, the hell with it. We're just going to do 15-yard for everything. I really do think we need two different penalties as it pertains to a quote-unquote targeting or an unnecessary roughness. Sure, there are some egregious plays where a player maybe should be kicked out of the game. That should be the penalty. But then there are plays like that where it's like, I don't know. I would, if you polled 500 people, I think less than 50% would say that's targeting. And not only is that an automatic first down and a 15-yard penalty, but the bigger penalty is you're losing one of your best players for the entire game. Now, what they did this year was they did change the targeting penalty in the second half, where if you get a targeting penalty in the second half, you were automatically out the first half of the next game. What they've done is they've allowed that to go to basically a review process, and you can send that play in, get it reviewed, and get your player reinstated to be able to start that next game if whoever's reviewing that determines that shouldn't have been called. But there's no review process really other than what they're looking at in the booth during the game. There's no review process for a first half targeting.
No.
So I think everybody's been watching these targeting penalties for a long time now. I think we're pretty clear on what is completely egregious and a player needs to be taken out of the game, and what is, oh man, that's too bad that happened. Sure, let's give him 15 yards, but that player should not be ejected from the game.
We don't want headhunting in the sport. Like we
I think it's done a pretty good job of getting rid of the headhunters.
Yeah. So there was a play, and I don't think we have this one, but it was late in the second quarter where you saw it. So Colby Reeder, Iowa State's middle linebacker now, was going up to hit Blake Shapen. I think it was Baylor's final possession of the first half. And you could see him, Chris, hesitate. He didn't know how to tackle the quarterback. Right?
I don't know anymore. I don't know how these guys do, especially with a quarterback, because you can't hit him low, you can't hit him high. Where do you hit him?
And I could see, and I'm almost like, man, that's really dangerous. If you know anything about football, once you start to relax in football, right, and your muscles relax, they're not tense anymore. That's how you start tearing ligaments and stuff like that. So there was the second call was on Colby Reeder, an unsportsmanlike conduct, and this is the one that really got Twitter going. That he got called it right there again. Blake's got it. This was called unsportsmanlike conduct on Iowa State, unnecessary roughness, and this is. Here's the deal when we talk about how it changed the game, because you had 2 drives, and we'll get to the Anthony Johnson one coming up here as well, that which I think was the worst call of the day. Iowa State's defense, if you watch Iowa State a lot, Chris, generally gets better as the game goes on. Haycock's a really good in-game, and they had 2 stops on Baylor. Baylor ends up getting 14 points out of those. And how it changes the course of the game is you start to call the game differently, right? So Baylor's young quarterback, who, again, I think outplayed Hunter Deckers. One point, Hunter Deckers was 12 of 15, but 2 of the misses were short third-down plays. You convert them, it changes the game, right? So Iowa State had chances still and missed them. But if Iowa State is up 2 scores, you call the game differently, and Baylor's calling the game differently, right? And Deckers goes out there into the third quarter, and Iowa State's not running the ball well. Ton of pressure on him. You basically knew he was going to throw, and he got tight. And again, Baylor's guy made those throws, 3rd and long, Will McDonald in your face, completing a 15-yard play, right? He was doing those things, but man, it sucked the crowd out of the game. You wonder too. I mean, Matt Campbell at one point in the second quarter after the Anthony Johnson block, the cut play or whatever they called on that one, Matt actually took a timeout to just let the ref have it.
Yeah.
Here it is right here. You can see Matt just losing his mind. Again, like, I think that was the worst call of them all. You never see that called in college football. And he hit him here it is right here. I mean, that's at the waist. Like, it was just a really weird call.
I've seen it called, but I don't think this was the right call, because when you look at the replay, I mean, he's really going at the guy's chest with his shoulder. He's going down because he's a lot smaller than the offensive lineman. He goes down a little bit, but he's not chopping the guy's legs out. That's what the penalty is supposed to be for, chopping the guy's legs out from underneath him.
His right shoulder pad hit the guy at the numbers.
Yeah.
And that was the one that Matt, like all the football people I've talked to after, I was sitting next to a couple of NFL scouts, and they were just losing their minds. And I thought it was really interesting that if you guys want to go back and listen to Ben Brunn's podcast yesterday, Cyclone Sunday, it's also presented by our friends at Fairway. Ben talked about, fascinating to me, because I had a ton of Iowa fans tweeting at me, being like, oh my God, why are these Big 12 refs woo so bad? Sorry.
Jeez, are you all right?
Got a little allergies going on.
What the hell's going on in there?
Woo! This isn't like radio where we have the cough button. This is the live deal. Like, we don't have that. Bruns was explaining. So, like, Iowa fans were ticked at Big 12 refs because they think they got screwed in the Cyhawk game, right? Your tweet was fantastic on Saturday night, by the way, about how we're in mid-season form. Everybody's mad at officials. And it is really interesting, like, because to the Iowa fans, like, yes, like, we've been putting up with this for a really long time. With Big 12 officials, and it's just very inconsistent. And the reason why is it's kind of like this isn't an exact science, fellas, but in the Big Ten and the SEC, I'm guessing pay more because they're the higher rung leagues financially and stuff. So you are basically getting like kind of the bottom of the barrel here, to put it nicely. And it was just inconsistent. That's the thing that I think most people, all these fans are asking me, like, Chris, why isn't that called targeting on Baylor? It's the same play. You're right. It shouldn't have been called targeting, by the way. Like, those Baylor kids shouldn't have been thrown out of the game either. Like, it's all inconsistent. But here, this is just kind of where we are in college football, where I don't even know. Again, you see this on across the country better than I do, but I don't think that the refs even know. Sometimes I feel like they feel like they have to throw the penalty, And then like that one on Freeler, I mean, technically he probably did lead with the helmet. I don't think any of those officials were like, oh, I want to kick him out of the game though. But I think that they're kind of looking out for their own right. You don't want to miss on targeting because it's such a thing with like health and concussion and all that. We're just in a really weird spot as a sport.
And I'm usually in Conference USA and the Mountain West, and I'd say I've seen some incredible calls. I mean, where I had to you just have to bite your tongue, or else if you speak the truth, you're gonna get in trouble. Because some calls that have gone to review that we have been 100% sure in the booth is going one way goes the other, and it happens sometimes on a weekly basis. And look, it's kind of like anything else. Alabama gets the best players. Iowa and Iowa State aren't getting the players that Alabama gets. And the SEC and the Big Ten are getting the highest graded refs. And I don't think a lot of people realize that these conferences have totally different refs. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a top 25 Big 12 game. You still might have the better, more experienced crew at Indiana, Illinois, as opposed to Texas, Oklahoma, because of the conference affiliations and the way they go about doing that. And the one thing that I don't like is we're changing the rules every year. Yeah. We're changing targeting every year. So it's not just us that's confused. How can the officials,
they have a hard job.
Totally. When it's changing every year. Now, it's their job. That's what they should be up on the rules, and they do have to enforce those rules. And there isn't a rule where you can call targeting and not kick a guy out of the game. They have to do it. But at the same time, I think we're making it a lot harder on these officials, and a lot harder than it needs to be, frankly, when we're changing the rules all the time and we're not allowing for a little bit of gray area.
Our friend Josh Betts tweeted at me during that game, and I thought he made a good point that it should be like basketball, right, where there's a flagrant 1 and a flagrant 2. Like, there's a lot of times where an elbow will hit a guy in the face, and they have to call the flagrant 1, even if it's inadvertent. That's the whistle. But the officials can look at it and say, well, he didn't mean to do that. Right? That wasn't a dirty play, so he can stay in the ballgame. That's how, in my mind, targeting should be. Real quick from Jeff watching on YouTube, why did Iowa get Big 12 refs for the Cyhawk game? Because I believe, Chris, they rotate. So when the game is in Ames, it'll be Big 10 refs. When the game is in Iowa City,
that's usually how it works. Yeah.
I'm almost positive, Jeff, that's how that works. And Kyle just says, inconsistency is the frustrating part. I agree. Officiating's inconsistent across the country. Chris, it's inconsistent like within the games.
Sure.
So I understand.
And you saw, like you said, you saw that in the Iowa State game.
I understand why
start
fans
to finish
feel that way. The Big 12 is totally insane. I would put Baylor at number 1 right now, at a pretty clear one after Oklahoma loses. Iowa State goes to Kansas this week, who took care of business against fellow blue blood Duke.
What do you think about that line? Iowa State favored at Kansas.
I'm not surprised. Here's the thing about lines. So I always go, there's all these power ratings, right, where these odds makers have power ratings. I go off of one. It's Gold Sheet in Las Vegas. It's like one of the oldest ones. It's not perfect, but it's the one I use.
What'd you say? With Gold Shower? What was that?
Gold Sheet.
Gold Sheet. Okay.
The power ratings don't generally move that much from week to week. Now, the most you'll usually ever see a team's power rating go up and down is like 4 points, and that's pretty extreme. So, like, if you look at Iowa State, going into last week, they would have been about a touchdown favorite against Kansas. Iowa State loses, underperforms against Baylor because they were about a 2-point favorite. It was about a wash going into it, but Iowa State got the home field against Baylor. So they're not going to get killed on their power rating that much because it's not like they got blown out. Kansas almost hits the exact number against Duke, so their power rating is not going to go up that much. So Iowa State gets penalized a little bit. So, no, I'm really not. Now, you could make the argument that the power rating's wrong, and I think Kansas has as good of a resume really as maybe anybody in the country right now when you look at their wins, going on the road to Houston, going on the road to West Virginia, beating a good Duke team. Kansas should be ranked in the top 15. There's no doubt in my mind, but there's still
if they weren't Kansas,
correct,
they would be ranked.
If Oklahoma had their resume, they'd be in the top 10.
Yes,
top 5 probably.
No, there's no doubt. And hey, West Virginia doesn't look too bad now, huh?
No, that's so.
I was saying last week, West Virginia looks like the worst team in the Big 12. And then they go and they win at Virginia Tech in front of a great crowd.
Who's the worst team in the Big 12 right
now? Geez, because I think last week you could have said like Texas Tech, West Virginia,
Texas Tech,
Kansas State,
right? Kansas, like
they all had great wins.
So from an Iowa State standpoint, one, it's terrifying because all these games are hard. Like there's no like Iowa State is not clearly better than any team it's going to play the rest of the year. But I also think you could look at this league and say, yeah, you could have 3 losses and make the Big 12 championship game.
Yep.
I think this is I think it's a lot like the basketball league this year in football, to be honest. Because in basketball, I mean, you go 10-8 and you can be a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. Now, the football level isn't as high as the basketball. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just comping it where really anybody can beat anybody. And you look at a lot of these point spreads for the upcoming week, and it's pretty wild. So, Iowa State's got to get one back. Here's the deal. If you win the next 2 weeks, 2 games you'll be favored in, Kansas and then Kansas State at home, you're in pretty good shape, right? 5-1 start, 2-1 in the Big 12.
You'd be in great shape.
Yeah,
that's great shape.
You would take that. But this is kind of like now we start to get into at Kansas, 3-point favorite. You'll lose this one, and we're starting to panic a little bit.
Yes.
Big game.
You have to win this week. Have to win at Kansas.
Kansas is legit. Let's get to Iowa. Real quick, I wanted to comment on something. I've talked to you about this. I've talked to your ear about it. I tweeted something during the Iowa State-Baylor game because this kind of has something to do with Iowa as well. Dylan Doyle, the son of Chris Doyle, scored a touchdown in the Iowa State-Baylor game. And I tweeted something. I then deleted it because a couple of Iowa fans called me out on it. And I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, that was kind of a dick thing to tweet. I wanted to walk through like what my mindset was when I put out the tweet. So basically, Dylan scores the touchdown, who's an absolute stud, by the way. First team All Big 12 in my ballot. Like, he's a phenomenal player.
I had no idea that was Chris Doyle's kid.
So that was kind of the context I had in this was that I didn't think everybody knew why this young man would be essentially like taunting Iowa State's crowd. And I was trying to put the context of it's Chris Doyle's son. He grew up in the rivalry. This game probably means a lot to him. I should not have brought up his dad's past in his, in a moment where he had a celebratory thing. It was not fair to Dylan. I felt really bad about that. I didn't even think about it at the time.
You were just trying to give context to who he is, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't say anything that was factually wrong.
I said alleged racism is what,
which is why he was fired.
Yeah, but I totally understand why somebody would look at that and be like, "Wow, that was a total dick tweet." Like, I totally understand how it was taken that way by some people, and I just wanted to apologize for it. It was weighing on me. I really feel bad about it because the young man. I hope that my daughters aren't judged on everything I do in my life, right? Like, it just wasn't it wasn't fair. But I just wanted to throw that out there before we get to the Iowa conversation because I don't know. It was just weighing on me, and I wanted to put it out there. So I
had somebody send it to me and like thought that I was going to be all upset about it, and I thought it was going to be a lot worse than it was. And I read it and what? I mean, nothing was.
So he's
factually incorrect, but I get what you're saying. I get why you would want to take that down because
I felt bad.
You don't want to. Yeah, it was a bad situation with Chris Doyle at Iowa. You don't want to, paint his kid with the same brush. So
his kid had nothing to do with it. And the reason I even put the tweet out is because Dylan scored, and it was right in front of the Iowa State student section. And from what I saw, he like held up the football to him, and like it was like this. And then Iowa State fans are that the thing is like 90% of that student section, probably higher, had no idea who he
had
was.
No clue.
Yeah, and some Iowa fans called me out on it, and like it was halftime, and the tweet had been up for like an hour. I didn't even think twice about it, and then I thought about it. I was like, yeah, I can totally see how that just comes off as like a dick thing, and it weighed on me all day yesterday. So I just wanted to say I'm sorry if that was over the line.
So you took that down yourself. It wasn't the Iowa Everywhere boss that made you take that down?
Correct. I took it down myself.
Because you are the Iowa Everywhere boss?
I
really didn't think it was that big a deal at all, but I totally get why you'd want to just take it down to avoid painting the kid. Not even painting the kid with the same brush, but putting that out there in the same tone and the same tweet as where the kid makes a good play. So
it wasn't fair.
As Chris Shipley says, class act. You're not hiding behind anything.
No, I genuinely feel bad about it. I was like, I
know you did.
I lost sleep about it on Saturday night. I felt so bad because again, like that kid, he's a really good player, and I tried to convey that in this tweet too. Again, it just. Here's the problem when you do what we do is we literally give thousands of opinions a year. And on Twitter, and this is why I quit tweeting a couple years ago during games, is you're reacting, right? And sometimes we whiff. And that was probably one of my biggest whiffs, and it was a total blind spot to me, and it was eating me up. So anyways, your Hawkeyes dominate Rutgers. I was texting with John Miller during this game when Iowa got its second touchdown. I died. Miller goes, "This is a caricature of Iowa football," which I thought was perfect because a caricature is like an over exaggeration. But it really was. I mean, they were baiting that quarterback. Iowa football is currently the number one scoring defense in the country and the number 131 scoring offense in the country.
Out of 131.
I wonder if that's ever happened, honestly.
Best defense, worst offense, I don't know. Because usually the teams that are at the bottom, the worst offenses, are just bad teams. They're just bad. And you don't have a very good defense either. Iowa has an elite defense. Now, they've got Michigan this week, and you look at Michigan stats, they've got top 10 defense and top 10 offense. They haven't played the schedule Iowa has, but it's this is one of those games where this is what you're supposed to do to Rutgers.
Yeah.
I mean, they were a touchdown favorite on the road, sold out crowd, whatever. They didn't really have a chance to make much noise at all because Iowa took them out of it early. And as soon as they did that, it was over. It was done. The outcome was over, and any hope you had of like seeing offensive fireworks from Spencer Petras and the Iowa offense, that was over because Kirk Ferentz knew there's no way that this defense is going to give up 14 plus points or 17 plus points. And look, Rutgers is Rutgers, but I'm not gonna pretend like I'm still, that I'm upset about what the Iowa offense did. Sure, they didn't put up 300 yards. Sure, Petras didn't do a lot, but I think they took a step forward.
I do too.
I think that they did some things that they haven't done against a decent team this season, which was they opened up some holes on the offensive line for the run game, and Petras didn't look terrible. And I throw that Nevada game out because Nevada's one of the worst teams in the country. That Rutgers defense is pretty good. They protected Petras. He didn't look rushed at all. He looked very confident, and he looked competent. And I don't have anything to complain about. They're going to have to get a lot better against Michigan, a lot better, to stay in that game. But
the problem they've got right now is they're obviously the offense, but they're really bad on third down.
Horrible. But in that game, they didn't need to. You didn't. Yeah. You didn't need to do any. This was a Kirk Ferentz special. This is exactly what he wants every game. You defense score 2 touchdowns, so your offense doesn't have to do a goddamn thing.
It's just every time it's 3rd and like 9, and you know that they're going to have to drop back and pass. It's a really queasy feeling you get just knowing what's coming. But and I'll give them credit. Rutgers is a good defense, right? Thing is, the offense didn't do much, right? You get spotted 14 by your defense. You've got Torrey Taylor at punting. But I would actually say that you say they did what they were supposed to do. I think they exceeded that. I really do. I expected a better game than this.
Yeah, the big defensive plays came early. I mean, as soon as they got the first defensive touchdown, I just felt like this game was over. And I wasn't expecting 2 defensive touchdowns, but I was expecting at least the defense to put them in position to score 7 to 10 points with turnovers. And that was the only difference in this game, really. Turnovers. Iowa turned Rutgers over. Iowa turned those into points. Iowa didn't turn the ball over.
Yeah.
Bottom line. That's it.
Hawkeye football, baby.
But you can't do that each and every week. And
you could just see it, too, though, on the face of Greg Schiano. When Iowa got that first defensive touchdown, Schiano was just like, it's over.
Because, he was preaching all week, like, guys, if we don't turn the ball over, we'll win this game.
Yeah.
And then, boom. That Cooper DeJean interception.
Oh, so good. He's a stud, man. He is so good.
He caught that. That was like the Willie Mays catch over his head, and he somehow turned that into a pick 6. I mean, usually a guy makes that kind of interception, he falls down immediately. Like, doesn't catch his bearings, and he just zigzags through the defense like it's nothing.
Yeah, and he broke like 4 tackles on that return. Now, granted, it's Rutgers' offense trying to tackle him, but it was really impressive play. Van Ness continues to just wreak havoc on opposing offensive lines. Michigan comes to town. Iowa is it depends on where you look, 10.5, 10-point underdog in this one. Notable, Rutgers is a 41-point underdog, I thought, at Ohio State. Ohio State just blows out Wisconsin. That game was never close. The big noon kickoff is coming to Iowa City. This is an interesting vibe, I would feel like, because you've got this premier pregame show. You're the big noon kickoff. However, you also have a really poor taste in your mouth when it comes to Michigan after what happened last year in the Big Ten championship game. But Michigan hasn't won in Kinnick Stadium since 2005. How do you sum up your anticipation for this week, Hassel?
I don't think a lot of Iowa fans expect much. I don't.
So this isn't like Penn State last year. It's not as simple.
Yeah, it's not like this is not like the Penn State game last year. That was like, we have a real chance here in a big time showdown. We are every bit as good as Penn State. We can win this game. This is different. This is a Michigan team that just slapped the hell out of Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. And they lost a lot of players. They did. But they can put up a lot of points, and they have a really good defense. And we've seen that against Iowa. Jim Harbaugh has been really good against Iowa these last 2 games. The Big Ten championship game last year, and then I think it was 2019. I was there at the Big House when they just totally shut down Iowa's offense in that game too. I saw a stat today from CBS Sports Research that Iowa has gone 10 quarters without a touchdown against Michigan. So the last 2.5 games they've played against Michigan, they have not scored a touchdown. I don't see how they win this game unless this defense somehow neutralizes Michigan's offense, and they do something like they did against Rutgers, which is score a defensive touchdown. Because Michigan is not Rutgers. Michigan is not Nevada. What Iowa's done the last 2 weeks, sure, they've taken some baby steps forward offensively.
Running game looks better, getting better.
It did.
That's a plus.
There were some holes, and I think there's some confidence being gained, but I think any other year I would go into this game and I would say, geez, jump all over Iowa, because Iowa doesn't lose games by more than a touchdown. They just don't. They're in every single game. We saw last year, that's not the case. Whether it's Purdue, whether it's Michigan, whether it's Wisconsin, that has kind of gone away. Iowa has lost games big recently.
Do they at home, though?
Purdue got them.
Yeah, I'm just talking about like the blowout, though. Like, I know they lose games at home. Because I won't lie, when I looked at
Purdue blew them out. Purdue blew them out last year.
What was the final?
I mean, that game was not close. They lost by, 17 points. It was not close.
When I think of blowouts, I think of like the Big Ten championship game. Like, to me,
okay, they don't lose games 42-3 that often, but
when I looked at the line, I pulled up Circa yesterday afternoon, and I saw 10 or whatever it was. My initial thought was bet Iowa, and then I started thinking about it though, it's hard because in that stadium, Iowa has performed well in these type of games though. Where there's
but
they've just done. You think of Ohio State, you think of there's a lot, but they also had a lot more to work with offensively than they do going into this one.
That game against Ohio State, that was the Mona Lisa for Brian Ferentz. I don't know how they did that. I don't know where that came from, and then I don't know where it went. That never happened again. But it's not a night game. I think that takes a little bit of juice out of the place.
I would agree.
It's early. It's 11 a.m. Central Time. I'm not saying the place isn't going to be packed and jumping, but I think there's just a little bit different feel when it's a 2:30 or a 7 o'clock kickoff. But what I will say is Michigan, this is the first real big test for Michigan. Because they had the easiest, and this is not hyperbole, Michigan had the easiest non-conference schedule of any team in the country. They played 3 of the worst teams, 3 teams that are bottom 10. You could argue bottom 5, Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn. They finally played a team with a pulse in Maryland last week, and Maryland played pretty well against Michigan at the Big House. Maryland lost by 7. And I think Iowa and Maryland now they're totally different teams, but I think in the Big Ten pecking order, they're pretty comparable. So it's going to come down to turnovers. I think that's all. That's the chance Iowa has. Win the turnover battle. Defense, get them some points. Because I'm not betting on. I'm not going into the game hoping Spencer Petras can throw for 250 yards and a couple of touchdowns. This is not going to happen. It has to be the defense. It has to be turnovers, and it has to be that crowd and that environment at Kinnick Stadium.
What do you take from Michigan really having to claw past Maryland?
Not surprised.
You've seen Maryland.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that was a tough game because I think it was more about Michigan than and Michigan's competition. I mean, when you play basically 3 bad FCS teams, because that's what Northern Iowa would have a good chance against Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn. They might beat all 3 of them. So that was their first team with a pulse. And Maryland, I think, could win. Maryland could be an 8-win team this year. They were unbeaten going in. I think Maryland could certainly pick off a Penn State. I don't think they'll beat Ohio State, but I think Maryland is better than Rutgers, Michigan State, Indiana, and we'll see about Penn State. But I think now Michigan has, now that they have been tested a little bit, now that they have seen a team with a pulse, I think that helps them going into this matchup. But it's their first road game. All 4 of those games were at home. And now you're coming to Iowa where they historically haven't had success, but let's be honest, it's been a while. I mean, have any of these guys on this team played at Kinnick Stadium before? Were they involved? No. I don't think so.
That's where we suck as sports media. Right?
We follow these trends that just don't have any bearing
Those guys
on this year.
They had nothing to do with it. Yeah. No, we do it all the time, but it's interesting. It's just What does 2005 team, last time Michigan won in Kinnick, have to do with this? Really nothing other than.
And I've tried lately to, because we get all these trends, especially when we're following betting trends and stuff. Like, you just have to be smart about it. Certain things you just throw out the window. Like the whole Michigan struggling at Kinnick Stadium thing. Jim Harbaugh was the coach, but Kirk Ferentz was the coach. But who else was on those teams that's going to be playing in this game? I guess if you think that maybe it's in the back of the coaches' minds as they prepare for the game, as they get their game plan together, and Jim Harbaugh's shaking in his khakis, oh my God, I got to go to Kinnick Stadium again. But I don't think it has much of a bearing on this game. Now, that being said, it's going to be a tough environment. It's going to be a tough environment for Michigan. It's going to be their biggest test of the season.
So you guys get the big noon kickoff?
Yeah, what do you think of Big Noon compared to College Game Day?
So I'm probably old school. I don't ever watch Big Noon.
So you watch College Game Day?
Yeah, and I think it's just familiarity, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't – so like I know you wanted to talk about this, and I was like, I can't give a great opinion on Big Noon because I don't like Urban Meyer. Like, he doesn't do much for me. So that's not why I don't watch it. I just the nostalgia of like Corso and that's a whole other topic.
Yes.
But I genuinely just kind of enjoy game day and like the event of it. Now, I will say this, I don't make it a point to watch College Game Day like I used to.
Mm-hmm.
I think Joel Klatt's the best color guy in all of sports.
He's great.
So I'm excited that Iowa gets that team because I love Klatt, and I think Klatt will bring some really good, fresh.
Gus Johnson will bring some juice.
Oh yeah. Every punt. Torrey Taylor punts inside the 2.
By the way, I was not impressed with that Rutgers kicker. Come on, Corsack. That the stat about the no touchbacks in 3 years, it's because he only kicks it between the 20 and the 10.
It was a big letdown.
Yeah, he doesn't. Torrey Taylor plays. He goes to the edge. He gets you down to the 1 yard line. This guy just gets you at the 13. But I think it's cool that they're coming again. I mean, it's Big Noon was there, or that crew was there last year against Penn State because that was a Fox game. It wasn't at noon. It was a later game, but they were there for that. And then they go inside the stadium. They do the halftime. But remember, Bob Stoops was there just partying with every Iowa fan, partying.
Do you have a preference on the 2?
I do think Game Day made a great choice in getting McAfee on the show this year.
Yeah,
I've watched it since then, and it's totally changed things. He appeals to a younger audience. What I think the difference is Game Day is more about these tossing to long feature stories, and Rinaldi's not there anymore, but you know they want to get you tearing up. You know,
they do a good job with that. They do a really good job with those.
But I don't want to see that.
Yeah, I get it.
On a college football Saturday.
They do that well, though.
They do it better than anybody. They're great stories. But on a college football Saturday, I usually have it on in the background when I'm getting ready to call a game in the hotel room. What I want them going through all the matchups. I want them, and they do eventually. The show's just so long that it takes a while. But going through the matchups, giving picks, giving insight, and I think Big Noon does a better job of talking actual football, talking about the actual game that they're at. Like you would get a lot more talk, and you will, for Iowa Michigan on this matchup because Big Noon is there compared to if College Game Day was there. Because I think Game Day sees it as no matter where they're at, they're still every single game nationally. Big Noon is that they focus more on the actual game that they have because they know people are going to be tuning in for that game, and I think they do a really good job, and I think it was a good idea to put your best game at noon Eastern time because that 11 a.m. window was trash for a long time. I mean, that's always, it was Iowa, Purdue, and Illinois, Indiana. And what else? You might get Texas, Oklahoma every now and then, but it's nice having a premier game at noon Eastern time now.
This last week was the 11 a.m. kicks that was the best window. There were a ton of great games.
You're talking about the game I called, right?
Your game was great.
Eastern Michigan, Buffalo.
Buffalo with the upset. My guy Maurice Lindquist, Paul Rhodes' guy.
Yeah. First win that snapped a 7-game losing streak for Buffalo. They put up a 50 burger at Eastern Michigan. We did not see
that win over
they beat Arizona State. We didn't see our first punt until midway through the third quarter. And then we only saw one more punt after that. Two punts.
It's like Iowa football bizarro world.
Yes, the exact opposite of Iowa football. And Buffalo didn't even travel their 2 punters. They both got sick, couldn't travel, so they didn't have a punter, and it didn't matter because they just scored on every single drive.
So they never punted?
They punted the very last drive of the game.
Who punted?
A young kicker came in and punted for them.
What a story.
Who will probably never take another punt in his life because he's a kicker. But I don't know. Both of them, they must like be roommates or something, and they both got sick, so they didn't travel them. We went in thinking, oh my God, I think I'm just jaded because oh my God, if Iowa doesn't travel, if Tory Taylor is not available for this game against Michigan, and then his backup isn't available, that's it. Game over.
Honestly, the spread's 10. If you found out on Wednesday Tory Taylor was unavailable, what should the spread be? How many points is Tory Taylor worth to Iowa?
I'm going to go the other way on that, Chris.
Oh.
I think Iowa would score more points.
Because they wouldn't rely on that's interesting.
They throw things out the window. Oh my God, we don't have Tory Taylor. We're going to go for it here.
They quit thinking about that. Yeah.
I think they would score more, at least for one game. I think it would change things in a good way.
A couple other notes that I had. Minnesota just punks Michigan State.
You were right about that. I thought Michigan State would bounce back. Whew, they're bad.
We got fraud alert going on here with Michigan State, folks. Fraud alert. What in Minnesota have they convinced you that they're the clear cut? Not the clear cut, but are they? I mean, Wisconsin loses by 30 plus.
Yeah.
Albeit the Ohio State, what we expected.
But geez, they got destroyed by Ohio State and they lost at home to Washington State.
Are you now
Washington
a believer?
State's all right.
Are you going to row the boat?
Minnesota is right now the team to beat.
I think so too. Yeah, and their schedule is favorable, being that they've already got a win against an East team on the road.
Mm-hmm.
We went over this on, I think, Friday when we were picking our championship games. Like, they've got a favorable schedule the rest of the way.
You know who else is 1-0 in the Big Ten West?
Northwestern.
So
they lost to Miami of Ohio.
Oh.
Well, two-part question. Will they go 1-11? And how bad is Nebraska then?
They will not go 1-11 because Big Ten West brings out the best in Pat Fitzgerald. They'll lose to MAC teams. They'll lose to Duke. They'll lose to a Conference USA team. But when they play Iowa, they've got a shot.
Dude, the Fitzgerald thing is really weird though, because
I know. Either he's the best coach in the country or the worst, depending on the year. Because he's won 2 of the last 3, I think, either 2 of the last 3 or 2 of the last 4 Big Ten West championships.
I saw national media guys, and granted, half of them are Northwestern grads, so they're very sensitive about Northwestern. But I saw national guys saying that like they need to look at change.
It's Northwestern.
Well, I know, but it's real. It's a fast. You nailed it. He's either because I've always been a huge Pat Fitzgerald guy.
Me too.
He's phenomenal.
What he's done there is nobody else would be able to do that. I don't think this day and age.
But then you also there do come a point in time with programs like I think TCU hit it with Gary Patterson. I love Gary Patterson. I'm a huge believer in him. But I think they hit a point where they needed to make a change because it gets stale. Like you kind of peaked. I don't know. I'm not saying that if Fitzgerald got fired from Northwestern, like Nebraska should offer him whatever, right? Like that.
Mm-hmm.
He's that type of a guy. He's had NFL offers, but it really is. And I thought I played their win total over 4 this year, and I felt really good after the Nebraska win, right? I was thinking, man, they may hit this in October for me. I'm certainly not going to now. I thought Helinski would be okay at Helinski, yeah, the South Carolina kid at quarterback. That's a bizarre one. And this is why college football is the best. So Tulane goes into Manhattan and wins last week. And really, that game wasn't as close as the score if you watched it back. Tulane was better than Kansas State. Tulane then loses to Southern Mississippi. Kansas State goes on the road and really manhandles Oklahoma and kind of stakes its claim. Watching Adrian Martinez look like a freaking Heisman Trophy contender out there. Look at that run. This is why college football is the greatest sport in the world. You just don't know.
And then you look at the Big 12, and every 1-0 team like Kansas State has this horrible non-conference blemish, except Kansas. And every 0-1 team has a really good non-conference win. Iowa State beat Iowa. But except Oklahoma, I guess. Oklahoma doesn't really have they beat Nebraska. That's not that good. And then this week, either Baylor or Oklahoma State going to have a loss. It's great. And I love the way that the Big 12 is right now. I'm going to miss it. It didn't last very long, but everybody playing everybody.
That's how it should be across the country.
Yes. Conferences have gotten not just too big, but like way, way too big. They shouldn't even be considered conferences anymore. If you're talking, if you can't play everybody in 1 year, that's too big. Right? 10 should be the biggest. 10 in football. Because you should be able to play every single team. A true round robin.
It's actually, in basketball, the thing I love about the Big 12 the most, it's got a little NBA playoff vibe to it because the teams are so familiar with each other. Where that second time around, it can get pretty chippy, right? And then you got Kansas City, and it feels like there's real angst there, which I really like about it.
Whereas in the Big Ten, Iowa is playing Ohio State for the second time in a decade this year.
Yeah,
I mean, Michigan hasn't come to Kinnick in 5 years at least.
What we need, and it will never happen. But we need 10 conferences that all are 10 or 11 teams. And everybody plays everybody. And it's all regional, and you can drive to
But we're moving the exact opposite. Now the only thing we can hope for is pods within conferences and treat that pod like a conference, like its own conference. Because the Big Ten and the SEC, they're going 20+.
When I was in college, I could drive to just about every Iowa State away game. When they had the Big 12 North.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when the South and driving to Lubbock and Waco is quite difficult, but that old Big 8 pod, right, that was just so much fun. Certainly not going to be the case anymore. But yeah, the Kansas State, they're pretty fascinating to me because I have them on the over this year. I thought that, and again, this just shows you that game on Saturday. How bad Scott Frost really was at Nebraska, totally misusing this Adrian Martinez for his entire career. I actually feel really bad for Martinez because he's a good player. Do you remember when Adrian Martinez started at Nebraska? It was the Colorado game. It was the day of the Cyhawk game. I remember watching the game in the Kinnick Stadium press box, and I'm like, holy crap, who is this kid?
Mm-hmm.
And then he progressively gets worse during his career at Nebraska.
Yeah, he was good for nothing but an arm punt. He'd throw 3 picks a game.
Yeah, watch what Colin Klein is doing with him at Kansas State. It was really, really impressive. And then Texas and Texas Tech, I think you were on a plane at the time, but really a classic game as well.
Oh, I was on a plane, but Chris, I had I had a front seat. I had 3 TVs right in front of me with 3 different games, and I was watching another one on my phone.
Seriously?
It was perfect.
The Wi-Fi was that good?
Yeah, Delta. Delta's got the streaming Wi-Fi for $5 for the flight. So I watched this thing. Yeah, it was great.
Imagine being in Lubbock on Saturday night. They hate Texas. The hate there is it just runs so. It's not only an in-state rivalry like we have. It's you tried to kill our program.
Mm-hmm.
You tried to relegate us to a group of 5. It's a totally different level of hate. And
stole our great basketball coach.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. And he's kind of a dick on top of it, right? That's what.
Who? Beard?
Beard has the reputation. Right? So he's kind of like when he's at Texas Tech, he's like, oh, he's our guy. Well, now he's kind of cocky in the side. Like it's an extra salt in the wound right there if you're a Texas Tech fan. It was a great day, though, of college football. I really enjoyed it. And then I was thinking, man, Texas losing, Oklahoma losing. All I needed was Lincoln Riley to lose to cap it off. This great day of people you root against losing. But then they finished the job out at Corvallis.
Didn't cover, though.
Couple of scares in the Pac-12 because we talked about it. Going to Pullman and Corvallis, it's a totally different deal. Or Oregon and USC. All right, well, we'll be back on Thursday, probably. So there is. We want to
Yes. I'll be here on Thursday.
But if the hurricane though, we may have to move it up. We may have to go Wednesday night potentially.
All right, we'll see. I'll be here.
We'll be here, baby.
I might be underwater, but I'll be here.
What? So do you have to board up your house and stuff?
No. So if you don't have hurricane windows, then that's when you put the either hurricane shutters or board things up. But we've got hurricane windows. They're these windows you can't even shoot through them. They're bulletproof. Really? Yeah, they're so thick.
Kind of like a big cut of meat from Fairway.
Yes, that thick. So yeah, I mean, but it's. We'll see. We're going to get a lot of rain, but I think we'll be okay for Thursday morning. How is that? Did you like that sign that somebody made for you? The Clarinda Academy?
Jeez. Well, I will say this, that the Iowa Everywhere brand is kind of taking off, at least in the RV lots at Iowa State. So I'm like legitimately, I'm in my camper working Friday night. I had to go to an event, an Iowa State event for Cyclone Fanatic, and I'm come back and I'm trying to build our website. So I'm literally like I'm a couple hours away from the kids, and I'm just pecking away, just trying to get this website done. And it's raining, and it's just kind of a nice night. I'm watching the Syracuse game, having a beer, working. Go out there, and I see this sign. And the sign says Chris Williams, the Clarinda Academy's prodigal son. Brock, see if you can pull that tweet up, buddy. It's from Friday night. I want to show the audience this thing. I tweeted it on Friday night, so you're going to have to scroll back. The amount of human beings that came up to me this weekend and be like, yeah, go Clarinda Academy. And being like, the idea this one woman had that I need to stand out there by my camper and just wave at everybody just to get back at me from being such a little jerk when I was a kid. So these guys who are also in the RV lot, Mark and Jeff, they run a manufacturing company. And because my whole thought was, man, somebody is really committed to this gag. That they would create this metal sign. Like, this is not cheap. This is not easy. These things usually take, like, if you want to order one, it'll take months to get. They created a sign that says Chris Williams, the Clarinda Academy's prodigal son, and they put it in front of my camper on Friday night in Ames.
That was metal?
Oh, yeah.
So that wasn't like one of those flimsy signs that you see in somebody's yard that says, like, Trump?
It's heavy steel. Like these guys did not.
Wow! Did you get to keep it?
Yeah. And
you got to put that in your background when you get your office set up. That's got to be in your background for your Zoom.
You think so?
Yeah, absolutely.
I kind of feel like I got to display it at the camper, but I also,
Yeah, you do both. Move it back and forth.
All my friends from Clarinda, so they always, I don't tailgate, but they come to the camper and just use it for their, and they were just dying. This the whole time. And my buddy, I feel terrible admitting this, but one of my best friends, he was my roommate in college, and just we were little shits together. He pulls me aside, and he's like, Chris, like, there was one time where you and me were counting, and we drove by those Academy kids like 30 times in a row. And
they were forced to wave at you.
And if my kids did that, like, I would be pissed. Like, I would be, but my mom and dad had no idea, like, we're just jerks.
So these kids at the academy, in this academy prison behind,
it's not a prison, it's a school.
They're behind like barbed wire. They got the barbed wire fence so they can't jump out. So were they forced to stand at the barbed wire fence and just wait for cars to drive by to wave? Like, weren't they doing other things? Weren't they playing basketball or lifting weights like a real prisoner would do?
There's no barbed wire fence. They're not prisoners. They're out like in like the schoolyard, and they're playing like soccer. They're doing.
So they have to stop playing to wave at a car that drives by?
Yes. Game stops.
What kind of a place is this?
They're trying to teach them to be courteous members of society. A lot of these young people don't have the social skills, and they're trying to teach them that.
I don't know that, like, you get the social skills by playing with other kids, like playing the games, the soccer, the basketball, the lifting of the weights.
They're doing all that.
But then but in real life, you wouldn't stop your game and wave at every car that drives by. Are we sure that they weren't doing more harm to these kids than not?
Well, the place got shut down. So there it is. There's the sign. It's kind of that's fine. Good job, Brock. Way to pull it. Yeah, that is a heavy steel sign that these guys created just because of the show. So Jeff and Mark, thank you. It was a really good laugh. A lot of people got a good laugh out of that this week.
We have to keep the streak going. I think that's 4 straight shows where we've talked about Clarinda Academy. We have to find a way each show to mention Clarinda Academy.
My mom and dad were at my niece plays volleyball for Clarinda High School. And my mom and dad were at a game last week. And my mom said she kept getting stopped with people referencing the academy. It's no longer there.
So where do these misfit kids go now that the academy's gone?
Well, there's other schools, like Woodward Academy. There's other there's other academies.
Okay.
I don't know where those kids specifically. Hopefully they're thriving members of society.
Do they not have? Maybe we just didn't have bad kids in Eastern Iowa.
Oh, you had a lot of.
We didn't need academies.
They all ended up in Iowa.
No, those were all the bad kids from Chicago. That ended up in Iowa.
I had a friend who had a genius idea. He always told me he wanted to start a bar in Iowa City, like down at the Pentacrest. Is that what you call it? What is?
Yeah.
Where people from Chicago were not allowed in.
Oh.
You had to show your ID, and if you were from Chicago, you couldn't come in the
bar.
That
would not last because right there you're getting rid of 80% of your clientele.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, appreciate it, Hassel. Good show today. Brock filling in for Maddie Van Winkle. Appreciate you, my man. We will be back on Thursday. We've got Jordan and J-Bo. Wait a minute, Jared and J-Bo. That's 2 Jordans I just said.
I want to hear what I hope J-Bo watch the Iowa State game. I'd like to hear his thoughts on the officiating.
Well, I saw on our feed that we had a ton of people tweeting that Bohannon wanting his opinions on the officiating. So I'm sure that those guys will likely touch on that. Rose and Bloom, I'll be back with John Miller for your football preview on Friday. We do have I think we're going to be able to make a new show announcement here in the next 24 hours.
Whoa.
Yeah. So stay tuned.
That's exciting. Okay.
Hopefully even today, but we'll see. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you, Hassel, and we'll be back on Thursday. Have a great week, everybody.